Maximilian Hess. He is the principal of Enmetena Advisory, a London-based political risk consultancy, and joins me live now from Zurich. Thank you so much for being with us on the program. I want to get your initial reaction to the comments that the vice president there in Venezuela has made, saying that Venezuela will not be the colony of any nation and that the one and only president of the country is Nicolás Maduro.
Well, firstly, thank you so much for having me. She is certainly looking to try to strengthen her position in negotiations. What is clear is that the military, or at least large factions of it, have abandoned the Venezuelan regime, which for so long saw the military as a key backbone to it. This has to be said that this was an effective regime decapitation strategy by the United States. However, what is unclear is whether there's any plan for what happens next. Normally, one would expect that the U.S. would have a view and a plan in place for how to deal with that. I think perhaps the most surprising comments are the ones you just highlighted that are, in fact, from Trump around the opposition leader, Maria Machado, and her lack of leadership there. She is the most credible figure. She led a strong opposition movement there, and why he believes that is really unclear. Maria Corina Machado is perhaps the most popular politician in Venezuela at the moment, and without her, it seems Trump is trying to negotiate both with the outgoing regime and the military at the same time for something that leaves him with as much influence as possible. He did perhaps a Freudian slip, say the U.S. plans on running the country for a while. I think that is something that has a lot more risk than removing a dictator, and a particularly unpopular one like Nicolás Maduro itself.
What's interesting is that one of my guests earlier said that Trump did not use the word democracy, not once during that speech, which speaks volumes, especially when he, constantly said that they would be taking control of the country time and time again without giving a time frame or giving a structure of how that would actually unfold. But of course, you mentioned the armed forces. They play a very significant role. Talk to us about what can we expect from them, especially when it comes to the relationship that they may form with the Trump administration and the decisions that they make, how it could potentially shape the future of Venezuela.
Well, that parts of the military stood down and clearly had some kind of agreement, or at least understanding, with the Trump administration, I think is abundantly clear from the video that has been shared online. You saw U.S. Aircraft, both helicopters and planes, achieve air superiority without any challenge, no noticeable anti-aircraft fire, let alone fire by the large amount of largely Russian-delivered anti-aircraft missiles that are known to be in the country. Now, the military has also long been key source of corruption and oppression of democratic activists there. So if Trump, it is certainly not impossible that he is looking for some kind of deal that essentially brings in a military dictatorship to the country, and one in which he can split the oil receipts that he has said are so important to him together with them. I think it's a tragedy that democracy and the hope for a liberal future for Venezuela is not at the forefront of this. This is what has underpinned the international sanctions regimes against Maduro and his dictatorship, what caused not only the United States, but almost every major European democracy to withdraw official recognition from the Maduro regime years ago. So, this is really big questions over what exactly Trump plans to achieve. And now, of course, there are questions about international law that were raised by some of your guests earlier. Trump clearly does not care for that at all, but the precedent here could either be one in which it shows that the U.S. is willing to use its economic might, the might of its economic interests, to restore democracy and remove a dictatorship, or it could be one in which it just plants in cronies from the military or elsewhere who will run it as Trump wants to see it, and that will engender long-term U.S. opposition both within Venezuela and the region, and I think would essentially turn what looks like a short-term victory into a very large long-term loss.
Looking at the internal affairs within Venezuela, especially the economic aspects, it does have a crippling economy and people are just getting by. Trump has vowed that with the oil that they retrieve from Venezuela, he will make Venezuela a rich country, and people will benefit from these actions, especially with the oil that they sell to the international community, especially after they pay off the debts that he says Venezuela owes the United States. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Venezuela has the largest known oil reserves in the world. However, it produces less on a daily basis than the U.S. states of North Dakota or the U.S. state of New Mexico, largely a result of corruption, mismanagement, and then, of course, the international sanctions that the regime has faced for the last 10 years. Getting Venezuela back to stability and to a place where its oil can be pumped, explored, sold on the markets is something that could potentially have huge economic benefits for the country. We see just in neighboring Guyana, which, remember, Venezuela itself was threatening to invade only months ago, is the fastest growing country in the world thanks to its own oil developments. And just one country further to the east, Suriname, is hoping to join that club as well. Venezuela has not only those onshore assets that have produced in the past, but large offshore assets not too far away from the Guyanese find that could really turbocharge things in the future. But those claims that you mentioned, there's not only Trump's own claims and what he wants, but tens of billions of dollars in defaulted Venezuelan bonds, in arbitration claims, court claims against Venezuela. There's an ongoing process in the U.S. right now around the seizure of what was once Venezuela's star foreign asset, the U.S. oil company and series of gas stations, Citgo. So there's a whole bunch of Gordian knots there to be unpicked. And now one thing that I think one can say about the Trump administration is that they not only believe that might makes right, but that cash is king. And so Trump wanting to get his hand on those claims before everybody else could itself be a destabilizing factor, not only internally within Venezuela, but internationally amongst the other claimants as well. So even if there is the smoothest transition possible, I don't think that the benefits will immediately flow to the Venezuelan people. Mm-hmm. And if a long-term stability and a return to democracy is important, then putting the U.S. claims behind the claims of the Venezuelan people is exactly the kind of thing that should be done. However, I think it is unlikely that the Trump administration will do so.
Okay, Maximilian Hess, thank you so much for being with us here on TRT World and sharing that analysis with us.
Thank you for having me.